I know what it's like to say goodbye to your family. It's still the story of so many Mexican Americans today. It is my story too. In 2017, my younger brother Angel was deported. There was so much pain of family separation, of not knowing when I would see my brother again, if I ever was to ever see him again. He'd arrived in the USA as a 9-month-old baby. It was where his family was, his friends, his schoolmates. But his home rejected him, hated him. And even in Mexico, he was unwanted for being too gringo. He did not know proper Spanish, the culture, the slang. He was alone, with no family or friends in Tijuana. Later that year, my mother took the painful decision to return to Mexico herself. But it was not enough. Angel fell into a terrible depression. He self-medicated and once tried to cross the freeway in hopes of getting hit. Then my father also left the United States to try to save him. We've come full circle. 24 years ago, my parents left their home and family to give us a better life in the United States. Now, my parents returned to give a better life to my brother in Mexico. And me? I was left alone, here in Los Angeles, alone to walk the Olvera Street, yearning for my family and finding solace that at least this place exists to remember the good old days when we played in the plaza.
In the past few decades, there have been huge activist movements and mass protests against family separation. But in the 1930s, there wasn't a widespread political uprising among immigrants. And by the 1940s, the US was once again actively soliciting Mexican workers through the Bracero program, beginning a new cycle of migration and exploitation.
But the repatriation of the 1930s did have a deep impact on Mexican American culture. Musicians wrote songs about their anger and despair that became instant classics. It's the same anger, the same despair that I sometimes feel today.
Adiós, paisanos queridos, adiós, paisanos queridos, ya nos van a deportar.
Goodbye, dear compatriots, he's singing. They are going to deport us.
Pero no somos bandidos, venimos a camellar.
But we are not bandits. We came to work hard. When the songs faded away, Mexican Americans buried their trauma. Many of those who were worst affected were the American children who were repatriated to a place they didn't know. Now they were back in Mexico, out of sight and out of mind. Yet, a sense of dislocation and rootlessness often remained.
Remember Emilia Castañeda? She was the girl who left with her father on a train to Mexico, despite being born in the USA. Well, she eventually made it back to the US, and much later in life, she was interviewed by her daughter, Christine Valenciana.
I don't think I felt that I was a repatriada because, I was an American citizen. They used to say that I was atiriciada. I guess something like depressed. Maybe I was homesick.
This interview was part of her daughter's oral history project, and it helped open a window onto the decades of suffering that followed Mexican repatriation in the 1930s.
Because kids, used to pick on me because I was an American citizen. There are a lot of people did discriminate against us because we were Americans. We didn't belong there. Now, isn't it strange now here the Anglos discriminate against us because we're Mexicans? So really, where do we belong?
Ni de aquí, ni de allá. That's me too. I don't feel like I really belong anywhere. In 2020, I was able to obtain my legal permanent residency. But although I grew up in the United States and my entire life was here, I did not feel like I belonged. When you are constantly told that you do not belong and are unwanted, you sometimes start believing it yourself. So the first time I was able to visit my family after they moved to Mexico, I dressed like a typical Mexican of La Placita Olvera. I wore my hair in 2 braids, sunflower earrings, and an embroidered blouse to manifest my Mexicanness. But I was a caricature. Nobody was dressed like me, and it was obvious I was not from Mexico. I later tried to speak to fellow Mexicans, but my accent gave it away. My way of dress, of being, was so American. As the years passed by, I have learned to accept that I am not from either country, but at the same time, I am from both, ni de aquí, ni de allá.